Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Meetinghouse of Provincetown, where we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person and where we support each other in our spiritual search for truth and meaning. Welcome to those of you in the room, and welcome also to those of you joining us live stream. My name is Bruce de St. Croix, and I will be your worship host today. I serve on the worship committee, the pastoral care team, the safety team, and the committee on ministry. It's great to be with you. Our minister, Rev. Kate Wilkinson, is off today. Back by popular demand, our guest preacher this morning is Kenneth Sutton. You may recognize Kenneth from the welcome table downstairs or from the church office. Kenneth is our office administrator here at the Meetinghouse. We are so fortunate that he is also a deeply spiritual thinker and writer who has agreed to share a message with us this morning. Welcome, and thank you, Kenneth. Before we begin our service, I have a few announcements to share. Thank you to all of you who brought canned and boxed food items last week for our little free pantry. Our gratitude labyrinth was a great success, and we had another great day with the students from the school walking the labyrinth and leaving donations on Tuesday. Thursday, December 1st, is World AIDS Day. The AIDS support group will be leading a candlelight vigil at the AIDS Memorial next to Town Hall at 5 p.m., following the opening of their new drop-in center at 4 p.m. Rev. Kate will be offering a prayer as part of the remembrance. All are welcome. Our next racial justice vigil will be on Saturday, December 3rd, from noon to 1 p.m. in front of Town Hall. Bring your own signs or borrow one of ours and stand together for racial justice. This is also Holly Folly weekend, so it's a fun day also to be in town. There will be a crafts fair here at the Meetinghouse, and on Saturday night, Great Music at 5 will be hosting a Joy to All concert full of holiday music. Even though it's Great Music at 5, this time it will be great music at 6. So we hope you can join us for all these things Saturday, December 3rd. We remind you that our annual meeting is coming up on Sunday, December 4th at 2 p.m. on Zoom. We will be welcoming our new members at the beginning of the meeting and then conducting the business of the congregation. Everyone is welcome to attend, but only members may vote. If you have a question about the 2023 budget or would like to see that in more detail, we are having a pre-meeting on Saturday, December 3rd at 10 a.m., also on Zoom. We will be sending links for both of those meetings out closer to the date. Finally, we hope that those in the room will join us for coffee out on the lawn after service, and all are welcome to our Zoom coffee hour Tuesday evening at 5 p.m. Let us know if you need that link. let's take a moment now to affirm our Meetinghouse covenant. I will say a line, and then you say it back to me. Love is the spirit of this Meetinghouse.
Love is the spirit of this Meetinghouse.
This is our great covenant.
This is our great covenant.
To dwell together in peace.
To dwell together in peace.
To seek the truth in love.
To seek the truth in love.
And to help one another. Now it is time to light our chalice. As we light our chalice here in the sanctuary, I invite those of you joining us from home to light a candle wherever you are. In this way, we can feel connected even while we are apart. I'm getting closer to remembering to turn that on. Caroline Fox, 1819 to 1871, wrote in her journal at the age of 21 of the struggle through which a spark of true faith was lighted in my soul. The first gleam of light, the first cold light of morning, which gave promise of day with its noontide glories, dawned on me one day at meeting, when I had been meditating on my state in great depression. I seemed to hear the words articulated in my spirit, "Live up to the light thou hast, and more will be granted thee."
In addition to our chalice, you'll notice our Advent calendars on the altar this morning. In the Christian tradition, Advent is a time that recognizes the transforming power of God in the world and looks forward to the birth of Jesus. Christianity is not alone in celebrating light at this time of year. Hanukkah, solstice, and Kwanzaa all involve candles as part of their celebration. In honor of the Christian tradition, each week until Christmas, we light a new candle on the Advent wreath, a circle of evergreens, along with each of the preceding candles. The flame of each new candle reminds us that something is happening now, but something more is still to come. The light of Advent grows brighter and brighter, guiding us toward personal peace, shared joy, and more love.
This morning we light the first candle. We light this candle as a symbol of hope. May those who are without today not be without hope. May oppressed communities not lose hope as they we continue to struggle. May we continue to hope for reconciliation, healing, and new love in our lives. And may our own small light offer a spark of hope in the darkness.
Please join me now in a spirit of meditation and prayer. If you have a joy or a sorrow on your heart this morning, we are welcome to light a silent candle during the prayer or at any time during the service on the table to the right of the pulpit, and there is a journal there to record your thoughts and prayers. After our prayer, we will sing together Spirit of Life, hymn 121. You can also find the words on the purple laminated cards in your pews. God of our best understanding, God who is so far beyond human understanding that our names are next to meaningless, fill us today, comfort us today, help us in our aspirations to make the world a better, fairer, more just and more beautiful place. Forgive us and help us to forgive ourselves when we've fallen short of our aspirations. Strengthen us to face the so many things in our world today that disturb us. Strengthen us to withstand them, but also to face them and to correct them. We are grateful for your influence in our lives. And hope that your grace will continue upon us. Amen.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come sol sopra al volar, sube en la mar hasta moldear la justicia de la vida. Arrégame, libérame, fuente de amor, ven a mí, ven a mí.
Today's reading is from a different Caroline, by Caroline Stephen from Quaker Strongholds, 1890. Many people probably suppose, if they think about it at all, that Quaker meetings are no longer held, that the Society of Friends is fast dying out, and the silent worship of tradition is a thing of the past, impracticable and hardly to be seriously mentioned in these days of talk and breathless activity. Some such vague impression floated, I believe, over my own mind when, some 17 years ago, I first found myself within reach of a friend's meeting. And somewhat to my surprise, cordially made welcome to attend it. The invitation came at a moment of need, for I was beginning to feel with dismay that I might not much longer be able conscientiously to continue to join in the Church of England service, not for want of appreciation of its unrivaled richness and beauty, but from doubts of the truth of its doctrines, combined with a growing recognition that to me it was the armor of Saul in its elaboration and in the sustained pitch of religious fervor for which it was meant to provide in utterance. Whether true or not, in its speculative and theoretical assumptions, it was clear to me that it was far from true as a periodical expression of my own experience, belief, or aspiration. The more vividly one feels the force of its eloquence, the more it seems to me one must hesitate to adopt it as the language of one's own soul. And the more unlikely it is that such heights and depths of feeling as it demands should be ready to fill its magnificent channels every Sunday morning at a given hour. The questionings with which at that period I was painfully struggling were stirred into redoubled activity by the dogmatic statements and assumptions which the liturgy abounds, and its unbroken flow left no loophole for the utterance of my own less disciplined, but to myself far more urgent cries for help. Thus, the hour of public worship, which should have been a time of spiritual strengthening and calming, became to me a time of renewed conflict and an occasional exaltation and excitement of emotion, leading but too surely to reaction and apathy. I do not attempt to pass any judgment on this mental condition. I have described it at some length because I cannot believe it to be altogether exceptional or without significance. At any rate, it was fast leading me to dread the moment when I should be unable either to find the help I needed or to offer my tribute of devotion in any place of worship amongst my fellow Christians. When, lo, on one never-to-be-forgotten Sunday morning, I found myself one of a small company of silent worshipers who were content to sit down together without words, that each one might feel after and draw near to the divine presence, unhindered at least, if not helped by any human utterance. Utterance I knew was free, should the words be given, and before the meeting was over, a sentence or two were uttered in great simplicity by an old and apparently untaught man, rising in his place amongst the rest of us. I did not pay much attention to the words he spoke, and I have no recollection of their purport. My whole soul was filled with the unutterable peace of the undisturbed opportunity to communion with God, with the sense that at last I had found a place where I might, without the faintest suspicion of insincerity, join with others in simply seeking his presence. To sit down in silence could at the least pledge me to nothing. It might open to me, as it did that morning, the very gate of heaven. And since that day, now more than 17 years later, Friends meetings have indeed been to me the greatest of outward helps to a fuller and fuller entrance into the Spirit, from which they have sprung, the place of the most soul-subduing, faith-restoring, strengthening, and peaceful communion in feeding upon the bread of life that I love and have ever known.
Now is the time in our service where we take a collection for the ongoing support of this meeting house and our shared ministry. As we enjoy a musical reflection, we welcome your donations here in the sanctuary or online through PayPal or Venmo. You can find that information on our website, uumh.org. On and off-site, your offerings will now be gratefully accepted.
It's hymn number 4, if you'd like to follow along. I brought my spirit to the sea. I stood upon the shore. I gazed upon infinity. I heard the waters roar. And then there came a sense of peace. Some whisper calmed my soul. Some ancient ministry of stars had made my spirit whole. I brought my spirit to the trees that loomed against the sky. I touched each wandering careless breeze to know if God was nigh. And then I felt an inner flame that fiercely burned my tears. Upright I rose from bended knee to meet the asking ears. I brought my spirit to the sea. I stood upon the shore. I gazed upon infinity. I heard the waters roar.
Thank you. And thank you. When I mentioned my initial idea for the sermon topic, woo, to Reverend Kate, her eyes lit up and she asked, "Oh, like Scarby?" Whose act, unbeknownst to me, included getting the audience to join in a woo. While I suspect my thoughts are focused somewhat differently than Scarby's, let's practice a woo just in case we need one. Can I get a woo? While I've been intimately acquainted with Unitarian Universalism for over 20 years as a staff person at the Unitarian Universalist Association, my time here at the UU Meetinghouse since February is my only experience with UU congregational life. And so the observations that follow must be heard from that rather abstracted institutional perspective. I met my first UUs 35 years ago when I was one of a dozen Quakers who attended a weekend with a dozen UUs in Wappingers Falls, New York. The ostensible purpose of the weekend was to consider ways the two traditions complemented one another and where they diverged. But my memory is that the UUs who had first approached the Quakers about a meeting very definitely were interested in something they thought the Quakers had. In a report written by Larry Engel, a Quaker historian, and the Reverend Bill Schultz, then the president of the UUA, several differences between the two movements were noted. To some extent, these differences revolve around style, they wrote. Friends, it quickly appeared, prove uncomfortable with outright expressions of conflict, and events disquiet with the Unitarian Universalist tendency to argue points down to a fine distinction. 3 areas were specifically noted in the report. First, and most obvious, is that Quakers traditionally do not ordain ministers, while the UUA most definitely takes pride in a trained and learned professional ministry. Second are historically rooted differences in social location. Friends tend to see themselves as outside the centers of power, while UUs, especially Unitarians, have seen themselves as part of the establishment. The third difference is the one I want to hold up today. Larry and Bill wrote, "In our commitment to discerning the truth through every person's inner light, Quakers remain firmly within a mystical tradition. Although less prone to sterile rationalism today than in previous periods, members of the UUA nonetheless assign a more important role to the cognitive path. They tend to revel in their theological pluralism, and they question whether some form of ultimate truth can be successfully apprehended. In the mid-20th century, church attendance remained a highly visible expectation of community life throughout the United States. The American Unitarian Association created the fellowship movement, which was a very successful attempt to create lay-led congregations. Many people who could not agree with the beliefs or practices of their childhood faiths came into the fellowships, as well as existing Unitarian churches, and in many cases, they brought along with them an antagonism to religious language. Indeed, in our recent new member class, it was notable how many new members said they were attracted to the UU Meetinghouse because they aren't interested in organized religion. By the late 80s, when I was at that meeting, the UUA was concerned about the long-term prospects for a religious movement with such an anti-religious trend, and was also seeing the first instances of younger people who had been raised unchurched and were coming to Unitarian Universalism in search of something they lacked rather than fleeing something toxic. Could the UUA figure out how to reintroduce spirituality to people who had rejected religious dogma and organized religion? Could UUs remain a rational religion while avoiding becoming sterile? Unitarian Universalism is clearly a place where one can, without the faintest suspicion of insincerity, join with others. But is it a place where one might feel after and draw near the divine presence? Sometimes, and in some places, it seems like Unitarian Universalism is all about giving rational assent to the detriment of other ways of seeking truth and meaning. In 2003, the Reverend Bill Sinkford wrote in his From the President column in UU World, "Our principles serve us well as a covenant, presenting a vision of a more just world on which we agree, and our promise to walk together toward that vision, whatever our theology. But I wonder whether the language of the principles is sufficient to capture our individual searches for truth and meaning. For this, I think we need what the Reverend David Bumbaugh, a Unitarian Universalist minister and religious humanist, calls a vocabulary of reverence. We have manned the ramparts of reason and are prepared to defend the citadel of the mind," Bumbaugh writes, "but in the process, we have lost the ability to speak of that which is sacred, holy, of utmost importance to us, the language which would allow us to enter into critical dialogue with the religious community." Bill continued, "Our resistance to religious language, I believe," Bill believes, "helps to account for the struggle that so many of us experience in trying to say who we are as Unitarian Universalists. I always encourage people to work on their elevator speech, what you'd say when you're going from the 6th floor to the lobby and somebody asks you, 'What's a Unitarian Universalist?' You've got 45 seconds. Here's my latest." Well, this is Bill's latest in 20 years ago. "The Unitarian side tells us that there is only one God, one spirit of life, one power of love. The Universalist side tells us that God is a loving God, condemning none of us, valuing the spark of divinity that is in every human being. So my version of what Unitarian Universalism stands for is one God, no one left behind. Bill said, "Many of you I know are bothered by the use of the word God, but religious language doesn't have to mean God talk. David Bumbaugh observes that a vocabulary of reverence is implicit in humanism with its emphasis on human study and understanding of the natural world. Humanism gave us a doctrine of incarnation which suggests not that the holy became human in one place at one time to convey a special message to a single chosen people, but that the universe itself is continually incarnating itself in microbes and maples, in hummingbirds and human beings, constantly inviting us to tease out the revelation contained in stars and atoms and every living thing." This is truly religious language, wrote Bill. Bumbaugh says it whispers of a larger meaning to our existence and carries with it implications for how we should live. I cannot count the times at UU World that we received a letter to the editor complaining about Bill's use of the word God, some even going so far as to mention imaginary friend, or that there was no definition of spirituality in the dictionary, or projecting their fears onto Bill's attempt to encourage a language of reverence. I am so relieved to experience no lack of reverence here at the Meetinghouse, nor a variety of language to express it. Can I get a woo? While I was doing a tarot-related live YouTube conversation back in June, I was asked about my approach to using tarot. I use tarot for self-reflection with a mostly psychological approach. I believe that the wisdom and insight we seek is already within us. We can use a variety of practices or external aids, like tarot, to help us draw out our inner wisdom, but I don't think that a deck of cards has any particular spiritual or esoteric significance. And yet, in that conversation, to the great delight of my friends who were watching, I observed that the woo happens. I'm deeply ambivalent about woo, but the fact is that sometimes the same card keeps turning up with an undeniably pertinent, timely message. The different categories of tarot cards show up in statistically unlikely combinations, and I've kept spreadsheets for periods of time so I can actually document this phenomenon. I come by my comfort in rational religious spaces, honestly. My ambivalence about woo is definitely a change from some earlier times in my life. When I was a practicing Quaker, I believed and taught that God can directly inspire those who carefully listen inwardly. The reading from Caroline Stephen, Virginia Woolf's aunt, by the way, is popular among friends for the low on one never-to-be-forgotten Sunday morning passage that celebrates Quaker worship, and it was not intended as an advertisement. I selected it for you today because of the preceding paragraphs concerned with truth and authenticity and the need to come out from organized religion to find a way with personal integrity. As a practicing Quaker, my religious and spiritual life existed in a mystical context where I understood myself to experience divine inspiration. I was ambivalent about the person and nature of Jesus, but I was not ambivalent about the reality of a divine spirit intervening in the world. What changed? I hit a long, long dry spell where I no longer felt that divine presence, and I fell away from my Quaker meeting, and it just felt as though it didn't make any sense. Stronger cultural expectations might have kept me in my Quaker meeting, or perhaps if I hadn't been so dependent on a feeling. The apophatic tradition, which is to say theologies and religious practices based on the absence of any experience of God, is something that I was familiar with, and it includes centuries of history and writings, including by friends. But contemporary liberal Quakers don't really look at religion systematically, so my meeting wasn't a particular support. And I was working for the Unitarian Universalist Association, which also doesn't care much about mystical understandings of the absence of God. Growing up, I wasn't ambivalent about woo because it didn't exist in my family of origin. We didn't go to church and didn't belong to any religion, although we were what I've come to recognize as cultural Christians. We did, however, spend a great deal of time out in nature. We went for rides in the desert, and my parents taught my sister and I the delights of paying attention to the world around us. We didn't use words like awe and wonder, but that is what we were experiencing. It was all pretty matter of fact at the same time, without any thought of mystical significance or divine creation. I'm still unable to put my feelings about nature into adequate words. Living out here on the edge of the continent, surely all of us experience awe at the beauty around us. Although I can read about glacial deposits and kettle ponds and the rarity of the Atlantic coastal pine barrens ecosystem, that rational understanding only enriches the awe. It does not create it. Wind and tides, and sand and sky, and dwarf pines and cranberry bogs and marshes, and herring and whales, and being able both to watch the sun rise over the ocean and to watch it set over the bay. Can I get a woo? In the last several months, as I have struggled with physical ailments, several of you have said you were praying for me. And every Sunday, we are invited to light candles of joy or sorrow, very neutral, that phrase, as part of a time of prayer and meditation, of course. This is a UU congregation, after all. I wonder if we went around the room, what each person here or online would say they understand that word to mean, or what they experience during that time in the service. How many of us would be unable to give a clear, logical, rational definition, even of our personal understanding, much less some shared idea? In my decades of Quaker leadership, I delivered vocal ministry in meetings for worship and also spoke by invitation at various gatherings. In none of those cases did I prepare a text in advance. At most, I would have an outline of ideas I wanted to address. In friends' meetings that worship on the basis of silent waiting, it is considered very bad form to arrive predetermined to speak, but very good practice to arrive prepared. In fact, our lives should be preparation for all sorts of ministry. You'll observe that I am reading this sermon. Did you notice that I did not read the prayer? Neither today nor the first time that I preached here earlier in the year would my previous Quaker principles stretch far enough to permit a pre-written, prepared prayer. This in spite of the fact that I continue to be in the long, dry spell spiritually, very rarely feel any presence of divine inspiration, and I'm confident I cannot come up with a coherent definition of what prayer means to me. And yet it remains important to me that I summon up the memory of faith and to open myself to whatever inspiration might come. So, rational religion remains ever in danger of sterility, while inviting awe and wonder. Tarot cards repeat. Religious feelings and affiliations ebb and flow. The sun rises, but actually, isn't it amazing that we're on a spinning orb in space and it is we that are moving? People pray for one another. It's all a mystery. Can I get a woo? It has become our practice to pose a question based on the theme of the service each week. It can be a topic of dinner conversation tonight, or a question to pose to friends during the week. And if you'd like to delve deeper into this question, you can join us on Zoom Tuesday at 5. Here's the question. What unreasonable, illogical, unexplainable, yet undeniably true thing do you believe or do? What unreasonable, illogical, unexplainable, yet undeniably true thing do you believe or do? Thank you for joining us this morning. Go in peace.